to me earlier. But anyway, as I said, Comic Geeks Tonight, we do a little bit of everything. We're basically an online comic book forum. People can put their stuff up on our page. They can show their own work. We basically redeliver comic book news, whatever's pretty much going on in the geek world, more or less. The panel I'm doing tonight, the discussion came, actually it's kind of a labor of love. It came about when I started Comic Geeks Unite, which is people would ask for advice on how to deal with heckling when they read comics. As Comic Geeks, we're not ashamed for reading comics, it just gets old. So I've been kind of slowly piecing this together ever since. This is the first time I've really formally compilated it, so to speak. You're not able to actually do interesting stuff. And for the most part, we've all heard the heckles. Why are you reading that trash? Why don't you grow up? Isn't that a kid's book? Get a life. You know, things like that. It gets old. What people don't realize is there's actually so much more to comic books than what they just see on the cover. There we go. Okay. So, let's say, people seem to think the pictures lower the quality. Like if you read something that has a lot of pictures, suddenly you don't have the IQ that you should have. But let's throw some technical stuff at you, but I promise it's slow. I'm not supposed to do that. That's why. So, anyway, Merriam-Webster defines a comic book as a magazine containing sequences of comic strips, usually hyphenated in our attributed use. It's the basic physical form of what a comic book is, but it lacks any other definition than that. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, a comic book is a bound collection of comic strips, usually in chronological sequence, typically telling a single story or a series of different stories. A little bit better, but Scott McCloud, who wrote the books Understanding Comics and Making Comics, defines comics as juxtaposed pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence intended to convey information in order to produce an aesthetic response to the work. Realize that's a lot of technical stuff to throw at you. But let's combine all of them just so we have a working definition for this discussion. So if we take a little bit of all of them, what we come up with is a magazine containing juxtaposed, I cannot say that word type, pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence, typically telling a single story or a series of different stories, and or to produce an aesthetic response in the viewer. It's a bit more compound and complex than just a book with pictures. So, but in all fairness, comic books haven't gotten a bad rap since they got started. The grandfather of comics is the penny dreadful. And that is, it's an inexpensive novel, a dime novel. Again, Encyclopedia Britannica defines it as an inexpensive novel of violent nature of crime that was essentially popular in mid to late Victorian England. Penny dreadfuls were often issued in 8-page installments, like dime novel and shilling chalker. Usually connotes rather careless and second-rate writing as well as gory themes. So this is what started comics. It has already got a bad rap. You know, it's trashy literature, it's gory. Yeah, comic books have violent themes. They are a bit graphic. But and you got to figure too, the Penny Dreadful is also what told the story of Sweetie Todd. If that isn't enough to get you a bad rap and kind of give you a reputation, telling the story of the demon barber of Fleet Street, don't know what will. But Penny Dreadful, again, Encyclopedia Britannica, it's an awful mouthful. Merriam-Webster defines it as a story or periodical characterized by sensationalism and violence. Sounds like a comic book. Yeah, sensationalism and violence. Comics have that, but they also have a lot of other things too. Do you see it okay?
Yeah.
All right. And what's interesting, and most people don't realize, is that books have elements of classical literature. For example, did you know that Batman was initially based on Sherlock Holmes? Actually, it was very heavily based on Sherlock Holmes. It's how he got the name of the world's greatest detective. And in fact, before Robin was created solely so Batman would have someone to talk to. Before Robin, Batman talked to himself a lot. So they needed to give him Robin so that he would have someone else to talk to explain what it was he was doing. Robin became Watson to Batman's Holmes. And the other interesting thing is that Robin, he's got the red vest. People assume he was named after a bird. That's only part of it. Robin was actually named for another classic literary hero, Robin Hood. As you can see, it says there, it says that thus Dick Grayson, by the hand of fate, is transformed into that astonishing phenomenon, that young Robin Hood of today, Robin the Boy Wonder. So there's all these little references people aren't picking up on. Another fun fact, when Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, when they first created Superman, he actually wasn't an alien. He was human. First story they ever did featuring Superman has been likened to Friedrich Nietzsche, his essay on the Uberman, the Superman. A lot of people make that association because Superman and Uberman is an easy association to make. But in the Superman we know today, that's actually not a good comparison to make, simply because Nietzsche was talking about people, actual people. Superman's not. And the other thing is Nietzsche's Uberman was also the inspiration for Hitler and the Holocaust, which is something else that could get called that around, even though the connection has never been really made between the two. The Superman was initially human. He was a man giving telekinetic powers by a mad scientist. He was a homeless man. He went around trying to conquer the world. So if we look at that example, then yeah, it's easy to make that kind of connection. But after that first story, they changed it, and he became the last son of Krypton that we all know and love today. Wearing his underwear on the outside of his pants. The Incredible Hulk actually is derived from two different characters. Stanley has said two different characters. One is a famous monster of Filmland, which is Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, and the other was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Although given that the Hulk changes pretty much at will, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde reference isn't exactly a stretch to make that connection. So, and in comics, there's tons of publishers, and the two that are always making headlines are DC and Marvel. A lot of people want to know what the difference is, or there are different thoughts as to what the difference between the comic companies are. For me personally, I break it down as DC is all about lineage. It's all about handing on the cape. It's all about passing on the tights. Marvel tends to mirror current social events, current events, in their own way. If it wasn't for the lineage of handing down the cape, why do you think Batman has so many protégés? And with Marvel, their X-Men, to me, is the perfect example of made any protest, made any social uprising against a group, X-Men has nailed it. So the other big difference to me is each company uses a different region of mythology. With Marvel, they use Norse mythology. You ever wonder why Thor always had that hammer, was a thunder god, was all about the battle? That's how he actually was in Norse mythology. And Brother Loki was always very mischievous. Pretty much anything because he was smarter. Thor was a hit now, ask questions kind of later, maybe if I feel like it kind of deity. DC, on the other hand, tends to lean more towards Greek mythology. Wonder Woman, the Amazons of Themyscira, and there have been several references to other deities as well, such as Ares, Hephaestus, Zeus, Hera. They all get some kind of mention in a Wonder Woman storyline. Although Marvel does have one Greek hero, and that is Hercules. But he's technically a demigod, so it's look alike. So the other thing is as far as people not thinking comics are any type of real literature is, they just see it as a single issue. They're only seeing one part of the story. But the thing is that comics actually do have a story structure. According to an article on writing.com, Basic Short Story Structure by Mark Robson, there are 4 elements of a short story. You introduce the main character, you introduce a problem or goal for the main character, you set the scene, and you set the tone. Although Mr. Robson did leave out an element, there actually is a 5th element, and it is not Mila Jovovich or Bruce Willis. Bad joke, thanks for laughing. But there's also the conclusion. We've got to wrap everything up after we do all that setting and give them a situation to do. So, but Robson's like, before we can even get into that, we got to decide what kind of conflict we're going to have. And he describes 3 conflicts. There's person versus person, which is pretty self-explanatory. That's usually what we see in comics. There is person versus self in air battle, and there's person versus nature, something that is essentially a force of nature that's beyond their control. We're just going to take those and put those into comic book terms to get a better illustration of how these all play in. Man versus man is basically any battle. Hero fighting his arch nemesis. It's Batman versus Joker. It's Superman fighting Bizarro. It's Captain America against the Red Skull. It's the X-Men against the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And that's usually what we see in comics, is that type. But in Man vs. Nature, we actually see that a fair amount too. It's Man-Thing, Swamp-Thing, defending their home from enemies. It's Poison Ivy using her plans against Batman, and it's even the Lizard against Spider-Man. And I count the Lizard more as against Spider-Man as a man versus nature than a man versus man, simply because once Connors goes into the Lizard form, he's primal, he's lizard, he's all reptilian. He's not really human anymore. And then for the man versus self, the 2 best characters I can come up with is, again, the Hulk. Banner constantly trying to keep that rage inside because he's always afraid of what the Hulk's going to do. The other one is Hellboy. Raised human, but he's a demon and always being questioned as to, why is he helping people? Why doesn't he turn to his true demon nature? And even from the human side, like, you're a demon. You could, turn to evil at any point now. How can we trust you? So he's always kind of trying to find his place. But again, there is another conflict Mr. Robson left out, which is person versus society. If you're wondering why I use the person who keeps leaving things out, it's because I actually liked his definitions. They worked for me. But person versus society is anyone who's basically on the outskirts of the rules or laws. And for that, we revisit X-Men mutants. People are afraid, they don't know what to do with them. Watchmen is also a fantastic example. People who decide to fight crime in suits, in costumes, to the point where the government decided to shut them down. And even Batman's a good example, because he's always wanted by the police. He's always operating on the outsides of the law, and he doesn't care, more or less. All right. So we've got our conflicts down. Now we can get back to the story structure, which is introduce the main character, introduce a problem goal for the main character, set the scene, set the tone, and the conclusion. But on another writing website, helping writers become authors, there's an article by J.E. Fishman titled The 5 Elements of a Story. has the same elements, but he words them differently, and I think that actually works a little bit better for comics with subjects we're trying to discuss. He words it as establish normal, disrupt it, create turning points, strive for character development, and restore order. It seems to fit a little bit more with the comic book theme, even though he's saying the same thing that Robson did. So we've got a conflict, we've got our story structure. Let's do a kind of sample generic comic story, just to kind of see how all those parts play out. So we've got our hero, he's got a secret identity. We've got our character. But there's a villain who is loose, wreaking havoc. So we've got our problem or goal for the main character, and we're disrupting his normal. So the hero confronts the villain who poses him with an impossible choice. So we set the scene and create a turning point. What's he going to do from here? So the villain gives him a choice to save the person that they love or save the city, to which ultimately the hero comes up with an unseen solution that allows him to do both. And in the end, the villain is in jail and the hero can go back to his life and spend some time with his loved one. So after that little exercise, how is that any different from any of these stories? It has the same exact elements. Whether you're talking Pride and Prejudice, whether you're talking Huckleberry Finn, it has the same elements as any story.
Nice binding.
I think you can get those at Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing too is that some people, and again, my personal opinion, to me, the romance novels, that's kind of trashy stuff for me. But if it's romance, if the girls don't think there's enough romance, there is actually several storylines that have romantic conflicts in them. Spider-Man, torn between Mary Jane and Black Cat. Well, she's hot and she's got superpowers, but I've been lusting after her since high school. And you've got Superman. You love Lois Lane, who is a mortal, so unlike him. And for years, comic book fans always thought that Superman and Wonder Woman should hook up because they're more on the same level. And in the New 52 series, they do. The Batman, talk about interesting love setting. In one universe, he has a daughter with Catwoman, and in another universe, he has a daughter with Talia, has a son with Talia al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul's daughter, the head of the Assassin's League. If that doesn't make things in a tight awkward romantic situation, I'm not quite sure what else does. And then, of course, there's the ever infamous love triangle between Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey. Does she go with the good guy or does she go with the bad boy? It's the age-old story. But it's more than just, there's also conflicts at the heart in comics that really gives them a certain heart, for lack of a better word. The whole reason that the heroes wear costumes is to protect their loved ones, because if the villains find out who they are, it's an easy target for them. It's an easy way to get to them. And always asking, do I sacrifice what I want, or what personally makes me happy, or do I do the right thing and save everyone else who may be grateful for 5 minutes and then hate me the next? After all of this, after everything we discussed, there's just one big question. It's why comics? There's several reasons. They're exciting, they're adventurous. Yes, they're colorful. That's part of the appeal. But they're also characters that we grow all know who Superman is. We know who Batman and Spider-Man and Captain America are. You know, they've been like childhood friends. And it's also, it's also a way to absorb multi-level information. Like I said, you read a comic book, you're picking up all of that story structure we just talked about. You don't even realize it. Yeah, and the other really cool thing with comics too is and those literature snobs, quote unquote, don't realize, is there are several classical stories that are being adapted into a comic book form. You can get a comic book version of Dracula, Edgar Allan Poe, The Odyssey, Treasure Island, even Pride and Prejudice. And there's more out there. Those are just ones I picked, for example. Ones that are considered classical literature that you've all had to read in high school at some point. And even modern stories are being converted into graphic novel form. You can get King Crude's Frankenstein, or in Autumn We Trust, the Stephen King Dark Tower series, Neil Gaiman's Coraline, or Eoin Colfer's Artemis Fowl series. You can actually get graphic novel versions of those. It actually dawns me, I kind of switched my terminology. I went from from comic books to graphic novel, so let's do a quick definition on that. Graphic novel is a fictional story that is presented in comic strip format and published as a book. Again, that's Merriam-Webster, that's the simplistic one. Encyclopedia Britannica defines it as graphic novel, an American and British usage, a type of text combining words and images, essentially a comic, although the term most commonly refers to a complete story presented as a book rather than a periodical. Okay, so basically there are two differences between comic books and graphic novels. One being that graphic novels are a collection of stories, comic issues. The other is the binding. It's the difference between staples and a book binding. That's essentially the biggest difference. And actually, the other really cool thing is there are graphic novels and comics that are geared towards learning. No Fear Shakespeare is helping, you laugh because you understand. No Fear Shakespeare is helping high school kids to grasp or to better understand Shakespeare. And as I said at the beginning, I majored in English. I don't care what your English teacher tells you. Shakespeare is meant to be seen, not read. You read it, it's not going to sink in as well. These are plays that are meant to be seen. So the fact that the No Fear series can do this and give you a visual so you understand better what you're reading is just fantastic. It makes Shakespeare that much more enjoyable, or at least makes it easy to stomach through if you hate it. Either or. But there's also for little kids, there is phonics comics to help kids to read and understand the basic elements of reading in a comic form. So, but that again brings us back to why comics. After all of this, we've broken down, we've made it a little bit drier a subject than it really should be. But I have a theory as to why people love comics quite so much. I mean, I can vouch for myself in a couple of these. The one is, no matter how depressed or pessimistic we all get, at the end of the day, we just want the reassurance that good is going to triumph over evil. Good guy's going to win, the bad guy's going to get their comeuppance. And the other is that we see a little bit of ourselves in all of them. In Peter Parker, we can understand what it's like to try and balance school, a job, family, friends, and try to have some kind of life. We all know what it's like to do that weird balancing act. So we can identify with Peter. But at the same time, it would be cool to put on a suit and go swinging around the city. Even Clark Kent. If you're having a hard time to read that quote, it says, when you look at Clark Kent, when he's working at the Daily Planet, he's a reporter. He doesn't fly through the air in his glasses and suit. And that's a quote by Gene Simmons. But Clark is, when he's at work, he has to hide the fact that he is Superman at work. Most of us in our day jobs, we have to hide the fact that we're a geek. I mean, it leaks out every now and then, but you can't go, like what you're wearing, you can't go full out geek to work as much as we would love to. So comics actually let us be the person that we want to be vicariously through their stories. I think comes is even though if you get to single issues, the story elements that we were discussing earlier, even if you get the single issues, it's still a part of that overall story structure. You know, you're still getting the characters in, you keep buying it to keep getting that story structure, and you keep seeing where your favorite characters are. There's a fantastic quote by G.K. Chesterton. He's an English writer, inspired such prolific writers as Hemingway and whatnot. That's about as English teacher as I'm going to get anymore. But he says, sensational novels are the most moral part of modern fiction. Any literature that represents our life as dangerous and startling is truer than any literature that represents it as dubious and languid. For life is a fight, it is not a conversation. And it's true. I mean, there's all the cliche sayings of, you know, you get out, you fight the daily grind, you're lucky to make it through your day alive, things like that. And comic just kind of gives a little bit more colorful perspective on that. So basically, hopefully, some of this will stick with you. The next time someone gives you flack for giving comics, I'll give you my favorite line, which is, I'm reading another enthralling chapter in the eternal struggle between good and evil. Of course, feel free to come up with your own, but hopefully the next time someone calls you unimaginative or having a low IQ for reading comics, you can point some of this stuff out to them. Even more so if they wander over to the romance section. Has anybody got any questions?
What's your favorite hero?
My favorite hero is the Incredible Hulk. In fact, right now on Comic Geeks Unite, November is Hulk Month for 3 reasons. One being, Lou Ferrigno's birthday is November 9th. Bill Bixby's death date is November 21st. And the original pilot aired in November, so we got this geek community going on. So we showcase Hulk all month in November. Anything else? Thanks for sitting through my spiel. Give you a little bit more insight than what you were expecting?
No. I just, you know, little random bits are going through my head. I had a very good friend when I was in high school, and he was, when I was a sophomore, he was a senior.
Yeah.
And he didn't graduate because at our high school in those days, senior English was Shakespeare, and he could not get around it.
Yeah.
And when I was what happened was we kept progressing. Harold kept staying a senior forever, and finally we were seniors, and Harold was a senior, and this was his last chance because he would have been too old, and they would have kicked him out. And we said, Harold, you're going to graduate this year with us. And we took him in shifts, and we grilled him, because it didn't matter who you had. The tests were all the same. It was, you take a book, who said what to whom, under what circumstances, and they give you these quotes, and you had to fill in all the blanks. And it was you know, basically a massive exercise in memory. Well, we got Harold through senior English, and he graduated. And that summer, he came running up the driveway, waving a postcard, yelling, "Shakespeare's dead," at the top of his lungs. Dad and I were eating in the kitchen, and Carol comes in, and somebody in his family had gone to England and had sent him a postcard from Shakespeare's tomb. And he was so upset because Shakespeare was dead that Dad, of course he's already graduated, Dad looks at me and I'm looking at him, but after Harold left, Dad said, you know, you may have got him through senior English, but you missed something along the way. And a lot of times, when you're young and you can read something, but the words don't mean anything without a mental picture. And comics provide a mental picture. It may not always be 100% accurate, but if you read The Lone Ranger, you get an idea a little bit about what the West looked like. If you read the Sherlock Holmes stuff. You get an idea of what Victorian England looked like. And we had got Harold through Shakespeare with the written book, and he had no clue. He was clueless. Okay.
It is, I mean, the most I absorbed Shakespeare was a college class, and it was, I forget what it was called, it was basically, we'd read a section of a play, and then we'd watch like 3 or 4 different productions and see the slight interpretations. That was the most I ever absorbed Shakespeare. Although I'll admit, I like Taming the Shrew because it has the best insults in it. If you haven't read it, check it out. But it's meant to be a visual medium, and like I said, with comics basically showing what each character looks like. I'm sure everyone gets kind of a revamp every now and then, but like with them doing these comic book movies, you don't have to read it and go, okay, well this is how the book describes them, but who's the hot new actor we can get to play this part? I mean, it's right there. It's like, this is what Batman looks like. This is what but they do slight changes to make him a little bit more realistic, because even I have a hard time imagining these people running around in spandex in the real world. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
So like when they made the leather suits for the X-Men, like, I can understand it. It's a little bit more practical. It's a little bit more stealth. You don't stand out quite so much as a freak.
Very good.